Yo, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
All good. I'm just going to move you guys into the middle. There we go. We have the Dutch sandwich now.
Oh yeah.
Oh, what's going on there? Mark, that's better.
Much better. Nice.
Sweet. So here we have TPN, Subnet 65. Like, who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing? Let's get straight in.
Good questions. Good questions. So I'm Mikel, and this is my brother, but he'll introduce himself later on. We are based in Amsterdam. We're also from the Netherlands, and we are two of the founding members of TPN, Subnet 65, Tau Private Network.
So my name is Mentor, and in case you're wondering, that is indeed my actual name and not a pseudonym.
Really?
Yes.
Is that like a typical Dutch name, Mentor?
No, our father's from Kosovo, so our names are slightly oddly spelled in the Albanian way. Yeah.
Ah, nice. So before we get into what TPN is, could you sort of explain the sort of the web that you guys operate in? Because you're not just doing TPN, you're doing all sorts, aren't you?
Yep. Yeah, we're a Taupil team, and we initially set out about 14 months ago, I think, to build a liquid staking protocol for Bittensor. We then worked on that for a while and decided that we wanted to do a pivot, mostly in light of the DTAU migration and also the lack of custody infrastructure. We then pivoted to being a subnet owner tokenization platform, where Tofu tokenizes the subnet owner key into fungible tokens on Bittensor EVM. Mentor has quite some experience with VPNs. And of course, once we were building on Bittensor, working with a lot of subnets, many ideas for doing a subnet ourselves also popped in the team's minds. And then we decided also to do a subnet ourselves, which turned out to be Subnet 65, which is, fun fact, the first subnet post DTAU. So we registered the first subnet. Registration costs were pretty high before DTAU. We then had the idea of launching it, wanted to do like a testing, etc., etc. DTAU happened, registration cost kept on coming down. And then internally we said, guys, if it drops below 50, shall we just get it? And then we agreed. And then we bought the slot for 34 Tau, while we were completely not ready for the storm that was yet to come. But that's where the adventure started.
Sweet. Okay, so we're going to have to get you back here on another podcast to talk about what Tofu is doing with subnet seeds. But today, let's focus on 65, so TPN. So how on earth does Bittensor enable VPN services? I don't get that.
Yeah. So maybe as a little bit of context, so I technically grew up in the Ethereum ecosystem, and we have one on our team, Just, who is very Polkadot centric. Used to work at Parity, so understands like the Bittensor side very well. And before I was working in blockchain related things, I ran a couple of small VPN companies, so I was very familiar with how that infrastructure works and so forth. What are the upsides and downsides of running things yourself? For the technical people who are listening to this, like running a VPN is not that complicated. It's super easy if you know how infrastructure works, how a terminal works. The thing you run into often is because it's so easy to set up centrally, it's very easy to detect as well. So if you set up a VPN server and have more than a few users on it, before you know it, you get seen by the powers that be, and you will no longer work in China. Netflix will know you're a VPN and start blocking you. And this is one of the challenges that the big VPN providers have. Like, how do you run a VPN node that has a whole bunch of people going through it, which from a technical perspective means the internet sees everyone coming from one place, right? It looks a bit like everyone's in an office building. But if Netflix at some point's like, hey, that's weird, this random IP popped up and suddenly there's 10,000 people living in this new office building, that's very easy to detect. Same for like the Great Firewall of China and things like that. the thing that we're trying to do is if you decentralize this network and have a large set of nodes, think similarly to something like Tor, where there's just so many nodes around, it's much harder to figure out what is a VPN and what isn't. From the perspective not of the VPN user, but from the perspective of the rest of the internet.
Yeah.
So there's two things that we're trying to solve there. One is make it harder to detect that you're behind a VPN, because that also tells the internet things about you as a user. By basically spreading things around among incentivized node operators, we can get into very weird locations. So if you are an AI company that wants to know, for example, I don't know, is a certain list of websites available or not available in Iran? Like as an example, like maybe you want to know whether the current regime is blocking your website. Centralized VPN providers have zero incentive to put a
Okay.
node in Iran. Like that's who wants to VPN in there. So we're specializing in weird locations. And
So literally all you need is one miner that's in Iran, and you can access the internet through his aperture, let's say,
yes.
and then have a little look at what their internet is like.
Yeah. So that is indeed like, so that's what you do when you connect to a VPN. You go from your location through someone else's location to the internet. And so those are kind of like the two things we're trying to incentivize. And when it comes to why Bittensor, so Bittensor's upsides and downsides. If you come from traditional blockchain world, Bittensor feels extremely strange because there's no fundamental verifiability in many cases. It's a balance of incentives that you're maintaining between validators and miners. But in many cases, like in the AI cases, but also in a VPN case, there is no cryptographic fundamental way in most cases to determine that a miner is being honest or not. And that is why we have validators. They're sort of probabilistically checking whether things are working the way that they should. And VPNs are a non-deterministic activity, which is why it suits Bittensor so well. So we can align incentives in a way where if you are providing a good service, we can up your emissions. And if you're providing a bad service, we can lower them. Where good and bad, in our case, are decided as how unique is the location that your miner is in.
Okay, so could you just double click on your incentive mechanism a little bit there? So can you just walk us through that?
Yeah, so I can talk you through our current and where we're going. Maybe that's interesting to you.
Yeah.
So currently in the first version, what we're trying to incentivize is have your node in a most unique country.
Okay.
So basically what happens is we have a list of countries in the world. We know what those countries are. The internet's topology, so like how it's structured, is relatively known. So there are ways for, if you have an IP address, you can calculate where it is approximately. So for any miner that plugs into the network, what we do is we look at where are you relative to the list of countries. Are you in a country where we have no miner yet? High score. Are you in a country where there's only a few miners? Okay score. Are you in a country where there's a lot of miners? Low score. And that way we're balancing emissions to create an incentive to be in those unique locations. Because again, if you want to be in a location that's easy, like you want to be in the US or you want to be in somewhere in Europe, there's a bazillion VPN providers that do that work perfectly fine.
So if someone's sat there in Pyongyang right now and wants to mine with you guys, isn't that guy or girl just going to be getting top scores like all the time? Like, how is someone going to compete with that?
Not. That's a unique location, and so you're providing a good service. But it is not asymmetrical. So because there are only 250 miner slots in a subnet, approximately, that means that they will score maximal because they're the only one in their country. But I think the highest we have for like miners in a country now is like single digit 5 or 6. I think that's like the highest you can get before your score gets so low that you get kicked out.
Yeah.
So it's not that if you're the only one in a country, suddenly you're outperforming everyone. It's more puts you in the top tier of emissions.
Okay. And when it comes to VPNs, some people may or may not know this, that you have logging VPNs and non-logging VPNs. So a logging VPN is where if a sovereign nation or government puts a gun to your head as the company and says, right, give us all the logs of your users, etc., they will literally hand that over to the government. Whenever I use a VPN, I always use non-logging VPN. So where does TPN sit in on those two sides?
That's actually a really cool question, because this is one of those things that is unverifiable. So you're using a VPN that doesn't log. That's not strictly true. You're using a VPN that claims to not log, which is the highest guarantee you can possibly have, right? There is no like way for you to cryptographically verify that there's no logs being kept.
Yeah.
For us, it's very simple. There's no incentive for a miner to keep logs, so they don't.
Cool.
And if a country would decide to try and force a miner to give them logs, they could, just like they could in any place. But there's a layer of obscurity that is protecting against that. Because if as a country you're like, okay, NordVPN, I know who that is. I can go to an office and I can put a proverbial gun to a proverbial head. But a random IP that popped up in the middle of nowhere, you could trace it back, but it's much
going to be
harder.
hard. And you don't have access to any of the logs as TPN yourself.
As TPN, no, we don't.
Yeah.
So if you would want to pressure someone, it would have to be a miner.
Oh, this is okay. So this is going basically the most private VPN you could use then. Surely.
Depending on your definition of private. So like as an engineer, you always we like to get very specific. So in some definitions of private, yes.
Some definition. And what's stopping the miners seeing what you're browsing?
So a miner, because they're the entry and exit node for you, they can see basically the packets that flow through them. In most cases, so it's basically the same. They can see the same as any VPN provider could, which means in most cases they can see the domains that you open, but not more than that. So they can't like see anything that goes through passwords, things, because most websites now use TLS, so like the HTTPS in front of the URL. And what that does is it means no one can see more than what domain you're calling.
So they see what the IP address of the previous router that you've just come from, and that the fact you've now gone to Pornhub.com or whatever.
No, so a miner could see that you're watching some non-work appropriate material, but not which one, which is the same as any VPN provider would. Yeah.
Okay, and so I guess so. How does this apply to the clickstream? So I guess would your activity through your VPN, would it add to the clickstream at all?
What do you mean by clickstream?
So the clickstream, in fact, this is probably another conversation. Yeah, this is going to the clickstream. No, I don't know enough.
Happy to go nerdy if you like.
No. But
no, we're not going nerdy. It's not happening.
Sorry,
we're not.
sorry.
This is high level, quick fly through.
Okay,
That's what this is designed to be.
I'm going too deep in the weeds. Mark, if you can bring us high level, that would be great.
Okay, so this VPN market then. So the existing VPN market that is already there. How big is that market, and is that of interest to you?
I think the current global VPN market sits at around 44 billion.
44
not million, billion. Yes, 44 billion, which is quite substantial, I would say, which is quite substantial. And of course, there's like growth forecasts that it will grow, because at any number you look, the forecast is that it will grow. But the current proven market is 44 billion, which is definitely enough for us to tap into.
Wait, so that's 44 billion is people just paying what, $9.99 a month to like Nord? Is it literally
It is a combination of so usually people associate VPNs with their NordVPN subscription, but of course there's also like a B2B market, there's a corporate market, there's like VPN as an infra or as an industry is a bit larger than just the consumer facing applications. And the combination of the global VPN market is around 44 billion. The percentage of consumer-facing part for that, I don't know that top of mind.
Okay, so huge market there then. and you guys are developing a service that competes directly with that, but it's better.
Ish. So there's the thing. I mean, here you fall. When you hear a big number like that, you guys probably have seen plenty of startup pitches in your life, and it's very much like, oh, just imagine we capture 1% of these sort of big numbers.
Utter bullshit. I hate it when people do it. 1% of the TAM, and we're there.
Like, yeah, exactly. So the thing that we're looking at is not so much like how big is that market, what percentage can we take of it, but like what is the need that is currently not being served. And the need, like if you look at, again, VPN industry, setting up a VPN server when you're a nerd, super easy. And I do it all the time with friends. If you just quickly need a VPN, you set it up. It's not so complicated, you know. So what is something that's currently not very easy to do? And that is, as a developer, if you don't want to run VPN infrastructure, but you do want to make VPN connections, and just what you want is, look, I just want to connect to a country for whatever reason. I'm scraping data, I'm doing an AI thing, whatever. There's no easy way of doing that. And so what we're trying to be is, like, the trite way of putting it is like AWS of VPNs, to have a decentralized network with all the options you could have, where if you're a developer who wants to either make a VPN app or doing something completely different and you just want to proxy whatever call you're doing over a different country, the way that our network works is when you connect to a country, you ask for a lease of a connection. So you just say, like, okay, I need for 2 minutes, I need to be in Brazil. Or for 5 hours, I want to be in Australia. And that's also, we can tie that into a bit of revenue later. That is also what you pay for. So this, in my view, will become a very big developer tool. And then what's built on top of that will also be consumer applications. It will also be like the things you'll see on your phone and so forth. But the users we're serving, were users defined as the people who pay for the service, are likely to be developers who then go build things on it.
And when
Does
can
that
the
answer your
average?
question?
Yeah. And when can the average Joe just use your VPN?
Now, if you want. Well, the average Joe is defined by someone who knows how a terminal works. So like the network works, but there's no like. So we're working on like graphical interfaces for like we're working on a Mac app and an Android app, which are more like I think that the people who are concerned with our revenue are like, okay, that's where we're going to make our first big revenue. Me as a technical person, of course, I'm like, no, that's just an example of what we could do. It's going to be much bigger.
Okay. So how long until Dum Dum over here can go to your website, tpn.tofu.xyz, catchy. How long until I can just go there and buy, cancel my NordVPN subscription and just use TPN?
The beta of are you a Mac user?
Mm-mm.
So the beta of the Mac we expect in a couple of weeks. The mobile app beta is more like, if I'd have to guess, between like 4 to 8 weeks. I'm the pessimist on the team.
How much will you charge for retail? How much will you charge for retail?
That's a very good question. We haven't decided on that part yet. Most likely we'll have a freemium model. So in any case, the beta will be free because we just need people to test it. We need to iron everything out. So then in Mentor's estimate of 4 to 8 weeks, that will be a beta version, which means it's free. And I assume anybody that wants to come in and test it and share some feedback, they can use it for free and maybe even get a lifetime pass for free if they're very nice. I don't know. We'll see. And then the price points in the future for the user applications, they'll be sort of similar to Nord and Express. Like most of the pricings are relatively the same. But from a business perspective, it's up to the team and the specific application to find basically subsets of users and craft their niche story. So for some people, the decentralized or the decentralization part will be very important. For other people, the just like how it looks will be important. And so depending on basically the primary value proposition per user group, the beauty of TPN is that like a specific application can be tailored for those needs. So it can be a very quick, lightweight app on an Android. It can be a more secure app on like a Mac device. and then we can sort of tweak around. But what I think is very nice is that other people can also tweak around, because TPN is like an open system, and anybody with dev experience and API access can build their custom VPN application on top. So we don't necessarily have to succeed on the user application. Anybody that succeeds on the user application benefits TPN as a network.
And it's tempting to think of the consumer application as what TPN is, but that's not the case. Like, that is just an example of what you could do with it.
Fair enough. So let's talk alpha. So are you going to be doing buyback and burns? Like, what is your plan with alpha?
So we have two primary plans there. One is that any developer making use of the API, meaning anybody requesting IP connections on the network, they have to pay per request, and the full proceeds of those requests will be used to buy back alpha. Maybe everything will be burned, maybe something will have to put in treasury or for liquidity. That is not decided yet, but the full proceeds of the usage of the API are used to buy back alpha.
Holy shit.
Or depending on the payment goes, maybe alpha payments will be accepted, but we haven't fully fleshed out that model yet.
And one thing to note here is the upside that we have is we don't need to convince like 1 million users to all learn how Tau works, buy little amounts of alpha. And that we have a relatively small number of developers who will serve large groups of people. And similarly to a developer setting up their AWS account, and that is much more complicated than a user would need. And then how the developer will charge money for their app, that's all up to them. But we're working with technically competent people who need to make like payments on behalf of users, basically. So it makes it much easier for us to say that buying alpha for a service is a viable way to get our customers to pay.
Yeah. Sort of like the Uniswap router spending a lot of gas fee on Ethereum mainnet, but none of the users deployed any contracts, right? They just used the application.
Yeah. So if 100% going to buying back alpha, how are you going to fund your runway? Have you already raised money in the past? Or are you just going to...
but also we have an owner share, so we get alpha because we own the subnet. But we've also raised money, that's also true.
Yeah. And in addition, the user applications or the flagship products, however you want to call them, that our team is shipping, nobody is forcing us to use those cash flows to buy back alpha. Our applications already pay for usage of TPN. I mean, we don't have a unique position in the subnet. We are just like a mere user of our own system. So we do also have operational cash flows there. I'm not saying we will not buy back alpha. I'm just saying that that's like one additional cash flow that we as a team and as a company do have.
Yeah, and maybe what's interesting to think about also, because we have the expertise both on Polkadot level and on EVM level, we've played with like a whole bunch of interesting things. Like one of the things we considered is, can we just have people pay in stable coins on EVM, which will then automatically buy alpha, stake it, and then potentially either burn it or stake it to a contract that can't withdraw it. So it's like infinite staking, which is a bit. So we've already built prototypes for that work. We were at a hackathon a couple months ago now. And the fun is because we have the EVM expertise, we have the Polkadot expertise, and we understand how that integrates with Bittensor. We can drive into source code to figure out how things work or why they're not working. We can do all sorts of like interesting, weird stuff with that.
If you're going to incentivize miners to have nodes in weird locations, will you charge a premium for that for users?
The developer will do that. So what we're doing, charging as a network, is more about who you reward in what way. So yes, we're like rewarding them by putting them higher in a list if they in the emissions list if they are in a unique country. The interesting thing as things will move is most likely the weirdest countries, so the most unique countries, aren't the highest demand countries. And developers, at least that's our assumption. We don't actually know that, but we're going to assume that there's going to be relatively few countries that are going to be popular with end users, so that developers will be relying on certain nodes. This will tie into a much more complicated discussion that maybe we can have on that other podcast you mentioned, because we're switching. So currently we're limited by 250 miners. That is not sufficient for us. We're thinking about tens or hundreds of thousands of nodes.
Yeah.
So we're going to build a federated system where miners operate more like mining pools that have an infinite number of flakes under them. That's a couple months away, but that'll change like how that works.
Or maybe subnet within a subnet, that changes things. Hopefully the subnets have another bunch of two.
It's a bit of an internal joke for us that everything is very, very meta, especially in Bittensor. So subnets and subnets. We've heard about this, but until we know what the specifications of that are, we have no idea. But yeah, there's daily jokes about we have to go deeper. Yeah.
But the current miner federation model sort of looks already like subnets, although they're not formally subnets.
Yeah. So right now we're not relying on Bittensor level infrastructure to do that. If it becomes clear that subnets have certain, then we could rely on that. But like we need to build. We want to ship, so we can't wait for something to come out.
Yeah. Mark, I've got one question left. I don't know how many you have left.
No,
our 15 minutes is almost up.
Yeah, it is almost up. Yeah. Go on, you finish us off.
What's the biggest threat to you guys?
If we all die, the network dies.
Yeah. Actually, that's not true. It won't improve. It won't die. It won't improve. It will remain.
Yeah. So what's the main challenge for you getting revenue?
Yeah, there's also I guess there's two parts of that question. Since we have committed to building on Bittensor, if something goes tits up with Bittensor, then our network is also not in a good position. So, for example, if the dynamics change for some reason and the miners aren't incentivized through alpha, they don't perform work. And then if the miners don't perform work, there's no IP connections, and then nobody can serve their applications. So on the subnet level, the biggest threat is just a systemic failure, either on the financial part or on the technical part of Bittensor. And then one threat that we do also have is that if we grow too quickly on the adoption side, but the network isn't fully federated yet, then we have growth issues, which sounds like, okay, fine, that's not really an issue. Although we do believe that it is, because if you start pushing post-beta into a production app for a VPN and it's a consumer application, and we don't have enough connections for users to properly use the applications, we'll lose the momentum, they'll flock, and then we sort of missed our opportunity.
That's cool.
So we're at a technical limitation until the federation is fully implemented, but it is still sort of like a luxurious issue, right? It's not like an existential threat, but it is one we take seriously.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for coming on, guys. That's given us a much better idea of what you're doing and how the money's going to come in and what you're going to do with it when it arrives.
So you're what, like 8 weeks away from turning things on?
Depends who you ask.
Depends who you ask.
Yeah, you're asking me or asking him?
But the moment we do have beta access, I'll definitely share it with you guys, and then you can be one of the first early users.
Yeah, and any nerds watching, like the command line interface already works. So if you just want to play and see that the network works, you can do that right now.
There we go, nerds.
Well, thank you so much. Right, so this week is a busy week. We have, in 30 minutes, we have Gradients on with us. So for those who are watching, just go and grab a coffee, have a wee, and then we'll at 12 o'clock UK time, half an hour, we'll be back with Wandering Weights. And then for the rest of the week, we've got 13, 61, 4, and 44. It's going to be a fun week. So, Mikel,
the other thing that we're doing that's not even on the list is we are doing a webinar tomorrow night, Siam, for any sophisticated investors, any institutions, any family offices that are interested in finding out a little bit more about our kind of macro view on things. That is registration form is at dsvfund.com/webinar if you are an investor or would-be investor and you're interested in joining us there. dsvfund.com/webinar. If you're watching a recording of this in a couple of days' time, you've missed it.
Tough titties.
Too bad.
Right. So, Mikel, Mentor, like any last things before we close this?
I'm seeing a lot of cool questions in the chat. If you tag us on our Twitter handle or X handle, we'll answer all of them. which is Tofu XYZ, I think.
We have Tofu and TPN.
Yeah, so tag us anywhere and we'll answer, because we love these questions and they're great questions. And
Sweet. Yeah, I look forward to seeing your replies to those questions. Nice.
Fantastic.
Right. Have a good one, folks. And everyone else will be back here in about 30 minutes.
2.5 hours.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Cheerio.
Yeah, guys. Bye-bye.
See ya.